Thank you, everyone, for coming. My name is Tara, and I'm just going to share with you a bit about what I have gone through with my brain injury. Initially, what we'll do is quick overview on what I'm going to cover is basically where my onset symptoms were, what assessments and recovery programs and therapies I've gone through, what I like to call learning to adapt, which is kind of lessons learned, what I've done as part of a return to work program, and also where I'm currently at with my symptoms and disability. Um, Initial onset for me occurred on September 27th, 2019, which was a fun day where, as I explained to people who don't really understand brain injuries, I basically woke up, the room did a 360, and I landed back in my bed. That was my first introduction into something was wrong. And at that point, what I had was, as the days progressed, I ended up with a lot of room spins or vertigo type of things, balance issues. I'm a computer programmer by trade, so my computer time went from basically unlimited down to less than an hour in a day, cumulative. A bit of a shell shock there. And I also figured out as we kind of went through things that I had a low tolerance when I went into spaces like um, uh, grocery stores or crowded spaces, spaces with a lot of visual patterning and stuff would cause me issues, which would cause me some disorientation. And as well, I had headaches. So when I talked to people, my best way at the time to explain what I was going through was to say I had a mix of concussion, vertigo, and whiplash type symptoms because a lot of people understand that, whereas they may not understand, explaining things in terms of brain injury and what was actually going on. So, as we figured out the symptoms, the other thing to note is for me, there was no um, like cause the day before. The best thing we could figure out for me was that I was in a minor car accident 5 months before symptom onset, which is our best guess as to what my initial triggers were, what triggered them. So naturally, as we're figuring out symptoms with my doctor and my physio at the time, I got sent for assessments. So I went for an MRI because we wanted to check if there were any current concussion indicators. There were not. I got sent for a hearing test to see if that could be part of the cause. That came back good. Vision test to make sure, did something get out of whack with my eyes, which is causing some of the problems. Found out my vision was normal. However, my optometrist did suggest trying rose tint glasses to help with the headaches to see if that would help, which for me it did, which was a great thing. As we went through things, also got sent for neurological assessments, one of which, not the one through insurance programs, but one that I paid for, actually did come back and say, yeah, you do have post-concussive type symptoms. The trick with that was there was one thing they couldn't figure out, which was my headaches. Because at the time they couldn't figure out if it was a migraine headache, concussion headache, or a headache because of the medication I was taking. So I will go into that in a bit and explain how we sorted that out. On top of that, there have been multiple physiotherapy assessments because initially we do the one at the beginning, but then we also get into ones as I continue through the recovery program. And when I did change communities, I did have to change physios. So there's been ongoing physio assessments. I was also sent for a vision therapy assessment, which did come back as, yep, there is something we can do to help with the vision therapy, to help retrain how my brain is perceiving what my eyes are sending to it and do the retraining there. And most recently, I've gone through an occupational therapy assessment just to help with the returning to work and trying to figure out what coping techniques and other tools we can put in place to help me out. So as I've gone through the assessments, I've also gone through a bunch of different therapies. So over the years, my physiotherapy program has consisted of manual manipulation, stretching routines, physical coordination type of exercises, and vestibular exercises to try and get my brain to basically sync up with what my body is doing in the real world, and to try and train it that um, you don't always have to be in that kind of tight state or that flight or flight type state. It's good to calm down, which also helps with the brain injury symptoms as well. Vision therapy, I got into, and basically what we did was we worked on retraining my eyes to work with my brain correctly. So there's a lot of eye coordination exercises, a lot of physical, moving around and changing the focus to try and help with that. What I call eye strengthening exercises. So exercises just to get the eyes working together um, in a better way than they had been. It was identified that one of my eyes did track differently than the other. So part of what came out of my vision therapy program was things like when I'm reading or working on a computer, it's best for me to have an occlusion on my glasses, which is a frosting. I don't know if you can see it in the video or not, but it is on these glasses. There's a bit of a frosting in towards my nose, which actually works to keep my eyes out. And that's come in handy with getting me back on the computer, getting me back to reading and being able to tolerate those activities. The other thing we figured out is that, we did validate that the rose tint in the glasses does help. So that has been kept and put into my permanent glasses that I wear every day. And we also figured out that using something like a screen overlay. So for me, I will use a green overlay. Uh, what that does is it helps me being able to see the words on the page, and it helps me focus on the words and kind of take out some of those distractors that come with just having a white page staring at you. I've also since discovered that I can also get a virtual overlay, which I use on my computers, which has come in really handy when I've gone through the return to work program. My occupational therapy over recently has basically been helping me learn how to detect my symptoms earlier. So for me, when my brain injury stuff kicks up and flares up, I will get, I will lose my focus. I will get, struggling with words. There'll be sometimes some sense of motion kicks in. And what the occupational therapy has done is we've been working to detect my symptoms earlier. So before they get totally out of control, the theory is if I can detect them earlier, then I'll be better able to keep them in check and therefore better able to continue with my day-to-day activities, which has been working. We've also been working on learning techniques to help me cope with the symptom onset. So when my symptoms do flare up, what can I do to bring them down, bring them back in check with where my normal levels are. We've worked on things like ergonomic positioning, so both for my home office as well as my work office, making sure it's amazing, like just having things at the right heights so that I'm not challenging my body, which then puts an added distractor on my brain, has made a huge difference in how long I can tolerate things. The other thing we've been working on is how to explain things. With returning to work, I've got a new group of people who don't understand brain injuries, even from a concussion basis or any other basis. They just don't have that experience. So what I've had to do, and working with the occupational therapist, we've worked on, how can I explain what's going on? Because, talking to somebody who understands brain injuries, we do have a kind of a lingo of sorts that we can all understand. But when we're dealing with people in the public who don't know that, it's very much a challenge to get those words and get them to understand why there are problems with whatever we're doing. The other thing I've had to work on is how to advocate for myself. So I'm a person who naturally doesn't like to ask for help. So for me, this was a huge thing to overcome. And it working with the occupational therapist did help me find those words and get comfortable with asking for, hey, I'm going into this scenario. Can we do this to accommodate me? Other things I've dealt with over the course of the years is one thing that's called a medication vacation. So when that one neurologist identified that they couldn't sort out what type of headache I had, at the time I was taking about 12 extra strength ibuprofens per month, which doesn't seem like a whole lot. I didn't think it was a whole lot. My doctor didn't think it was a whole lot. But apparently, what can happen if you're not familiar with what's called a rebound headache is what happens is you have your headache, you take the medication, your headache goes away for a bit, but then it immediately comes back. So you don't really get a huge amount of relief, and it's just a constant cycle. So in order to determine if that's what was going on with me or if it was a migraine or a concussion related headache, I literally had to go for, I think it was 3 months with absolutely no pain medications, which for those of you who do have that headache aspect, that's not so much fun. But for me, the benefit was we did figure out my headaches went down. And from that, we could move forward and say, okay, that was probably the cause of the headache. So we're going to try and avoid things like ibuprofen and Tylenol as much as I can. And hopefully, then any other headaches I get are just going to be kind of what normal run of the mill headaches are. So that was an interesting finding that I discovered going through that process. I've also been involved in mindfulness training. So what I found the benefit with that is that it brought me an awareness as to a little more awareness to like what was causing my triggers. Um, why was I triggering off strongly here, but mildly over here? But also it brought kind of that body awareness as to, okay, what is going on with my body that might also be impacting my brain injury symptoms. I was also introduced to kind of meditation and coping strategies in the mindfulness training, which helped with just bringing things to a calm state, which for me, with how my symptoms would show up, that became a really key thing to bring things back in check and start training my body and my brain to just calm down. Things aren't as bad. And with that, the symptoms would naturally just kind of come down as well. Another thing, kind of as things started to improve with my symptoms, I got into cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT. And what I found the most beneficial in that is they actually had me do collages to indicate kind of where I was before symptom onset, where I was at the height of my symptoms, where I was at the time of the therapy sessions, and where I wanted to go. So I do have those collages with me, and I'm happy to share them at the end of the presentation. Main reason I didn't put them in here is because I know there's at least one of the slides that could trigger people's symptoms. So if you're sensitive to visual symptoms, if you want to see them, I'm happy to share them, but we'll save them to the end so that everyone can actually participate through this to the end. The other thing I found with CBT was it helped me dealing with the positive self-talk and creating that positive image, because I was finding that you're in this kind of cycle where it's easy to follow the negative. But with them, what they were able to do is show me ways like, okay, yes, I may have brain injury symptoms now, but it doesn't mean I can't do things I used to do before. So it was learning that acceptance and learning that, like if I wanted to travel, okay, yeah, maybe I can go on a plane still, but maybe the trick is to say, hey, I need to be the last person on or one of the last people on versus being one of the first people on and dealing with all that movement going on around me. So it's just learning to think of ways to adapt so that I could do the things that I used to do before and that I really enjoyed. Other things I have recently I was introduced to the sport group that happens on every Saturday with Bayer. And that I have found has been an eye-opening experience. It was kind of the first time where I found I was actually around people who used a common language and who understood like what I was talking about. So, if I said, hey, my head feels fuzzy today and, it's just not a good day, the group actually, it's a group of people who understood what that meant. Whereas I was used to kind of day to day with the people in, my family and whatnot, not understanding that. So for me, having that uh, ability to just even sit and listen to people who have similar symptoms. Yeah, we all have slightly different triggers, different levels of triggers, but sitting and listening has become very valuable to me. And also being able to share kind of tips and tricks that we've learned over each of our paths as we've gone through things has been interesting because when you're in it, it's different, right? It's just nice to hear, hey, this worked for me, maybe try that, or no, that didn't work for me either, but it's nice to have those conversations. The other program I've kind of been in is counseling. I've What I've found beneficial with that is it's helped with the emotional awareness, because what I found for me is dealing with the brain injury symptoms and the life-changing effects that have happened. Naturally, there's some emotion there. There's some frustration. There's some anger. There are high points. There's low points. And just learning how to deal with that and realize, okay, is this a normal reaction to what's happening right now? Or is this something I need to deal with and try and improve and actually take action to bring myself, back to a calmer state. It's also helped me with some coping techniques. So for me, one of the things I found is doing things like journaling, writing things out when I get really kind of frustrated with my symptoms really helps me to kind of put things back in perspective and be able to move forward. And putting all that together, it does help kind of keep the mental health side of things in check, which then helps with the overall brain injury symptoms and just keeps everything kind of moving forward to going back towards some sort of a stable normal for me. So after doing all that, and as I've gone through all of that, the other thing I've had to do is learn to adapt. This has been a huge thing for me, because taking all the lessons I've learned from the therapies and the different groups and counseling and everything together, what I've had to learn to do is identifying what's going on to myself and others. So if by doing that, it just calms things down, because if you can get people to understand what's going on, I found it actually helps them be a little more tolerant when things don't go the way they expect, or the way even when I don't expect how things are going to go. I've had to learn to adapt by recognizing when I need accommodations. So before, my brain still thinks I can do things the way I did before symptom onset. And that's something I have had to deal with and remind myself, no, things have changed and here's what you need to do to move forward. So having that learning has been very helpful. Also having to learn, as I said, to advocate for myself. I'm not one who likes to ask for help. So having that challenge and learning how to be comfortable with asking for help, or comfortable with just saying, hey, I'm in a different situation than you are. Not necessarily identifying I have a brain injury, but just saying something as simple as, hey, I need a little more time to process this. Can I take extra time to do a test, an assignment, a project, anything that comes up? Just getting that acknowledgement that, hey, I need a little more time to deal with stuff. And another thing I've had to learn to adapt to is that not every day is going to be a good day. As many people, if you're a brain injury survivor, if you've probably had this happen. You could have a really great day for, it could be a half a day, it could be a full day, it could be weeks, and then all of a sudden you just get that one bad day. Um, but that's just part of the recovery process. That is part of what goes on every day. So for me, having to learn to accept that has actually helped me move forward in my recovery process. And as part of that, recognizing when I need to pace myself. So, pacing myself for me, I'm a person, if it's on my list, I want to get it done. Um, whether it be work, home, social, what have you, I'm just go, 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 go. And I've had to learn for myself that, okay, sometimes I need to slow down. So, for instance, last week I was away for the week for work. Well, what I've learned through dealing with the occupational therapist and having some talks is that, okay, when I go away for work for a week, one of the things I have to do the next week is adjust my expectations for what I'm going to accomplish because I'm going to be tired. My brain's going to be tired from doing all the extra work we did while I was away. So just learning how to pace myself in what my expectations are for what I'm going to complete in the week, but also as well making sure I maybe shift the dynamics of my day to where, maybe I'm not working all day. Maybe I take more breaks in my day to help me get through the day. Maybe I go for a walk. Well, not this week, it's a little warm out there. But maybe I get out and I go do something. I go out for a coffee with a friend instead of, hanging around the house. Just having kind of that a little more balance of those positives that help me cope with the day-to-day tasks that I have to do. And one of the biggest things I've had to adapt to is understanding and learning that things will naturally take me longer to do. So, one of the things I have noticed for me that is a huge difference is before what I could read, say, 100-page document in a day, skimming through, reading the information. Now, what I've discovered is doing that same task, it could take me 2 or 3 days, depending on where my symptoms are at that point in time. And just learning to accept that and build that into my timeline so that when somebody says, hey, how long is this going to take you to do? Um, Instead of coming with my automatic responses, oh, yeah, that will take me a day, which is what it took before symptom onset. Now I have to remember to say, oh, well, that could take me 2 to 3 days because of how I have to process things. So learning to accept that has been huge in my ability to learn to adapt to what I have to live with now. And leading into that, one of the things I have done is about 2 years ago, I figured out that, I wanted to get back to work. I'm not a person who likes to sit around, very low tolerance for myself if I'm not doing something. Um, so for me, I came up with a plan, and part of the plan was I engaged a work counselor who could help me figure out, okay, so my computer time's down. What can I do? I can't go back to my computer programming job. So what can I do as an alternative? So she worked with me. We found some job options. We found a 1-year school program that I could go back and get some retraining in. The benefit with the school program was that it got me exposure to what it would be like in an office environment. Because if you think of a school environment, you're sitting in a classroom under fluorescent lights, you've got screens in front of you, you've got deadlines to meet, you have to think, you have to use your brain usually, and think through sometimes some pretty hard topics depending on what you're learning. So going through all of that helped me figure out in kind of a safe environment if I could get back and actually do day-to-day work in an office environment. It also helped me work through um, things that I might need to consider when I return to work. So I had some amazing instructors to work with who were very eager to help me learn what I needed to put in place. So as we went through the schooling process, we figured things out, like I needed extra time on my tests. We figured out that, okay, instead of me looking at the screen on the overhead, which tended to cause my symptoms to flare up, if we print out the slide deck and have it in front of me, I can look there and I can take my notes and have very little symptom onset. We also figured out things like, for me, on days when I struggle with pulling the information out of my brain, and trying to communicate it to the instructor, either verbally or written, some of the best ways for me to actually get that information out and to figure out what it was for me to actually have a piece of paper and just doodle. If there was a table, I could draw out what the table looked like and fill in all the blanks except for what I was missing, and then try and fill in that last blank. We also figured out that I was better sometimes at miming out things to help me retain, not retain, but bring forward that information for them and pick the right answer that they needed. Other things we found is when I had to do verbal recall, one of the things in the training I had to do was read numbers off of a scale that were multiplied by another number. So what I would do was I would say, if it was say it's supposed to be 10,000, I would come up with 1000, and I would use that wrong word to identify. Well, factor of 10 can make a huge difference in the workplace. So what we figured out for me as a simple adaptation was to say, instead of putting all the numbers together, I'd read out what was on the scale and then tell them what the multiplier was. And then from that, we could then put it together and get the right number. So figuring that kind of stuff out for accommodations was really amazing, and nice to have a team of instructors who are willing to work with me on that. Then from there, we figured out, got through the schooling. I figured, okay, I can tolerate a workplace. I got into the job application process, which for what I was going into, a lot of it had online components. So I had to learn how to make sure the HR groups knew I needed accommodations, because dealing with computers was one of my still one of the things that caused me problems. So it was things like making sure, hey, if this is going to take 2 hours on a computer, we may have to break it into 2 chunks so that I could do an hour and an hour. And then from that, I was able to build on that. And when I actually started into the workforce back in October, I had an idea walking in of, okay, here's the accommodations I need. Here's things I need just to keep working at a normal speed. The next challenge with that, my workplace was great. They said, yeah, sure, accommodations, easy peasy. The hard part was actually getting the accommodations in place. So it became a learning curve for all of us, my supervisor and director and whatnot included, on, okay, we know we can do this, but how do we do it? So that has been a learning curve with returning to work. But the other thing that has happened is returning to work, now I'm with new people who don't know me. They've never met me before. And I've had to find ways to share with my coworkers, my mentor, my supervisor, and anyone else I engage with, how I need to work differently. So it's not that I can't do the tasks, but getting them to understand I'm going to do it a different way than you guys do it, simply because that's how it works best for me. So returning to work has been an interesting experience. So that brings us to where we are now. So at this point in time, I have returned to work, as I said, thoroughly enjoying it. Yes, there's been frustrations. Sometimes it's because there are days where I just can't communicate what's going on. But on the whole, it has been a positive experience returning. For a while there, I did have to move back home. So I have now returned to what I call independent living. And it's been interesting with that, how I've had to adapt my day-to-day from where I was before symptom onset to what I do now. There are things that I've kind of started to notice that, I don't do it the same anymore. And it's just being okay with that. And not having someone there to rely on makes it that little bit much more challenging sometimes, but you figure it out. I am an avid curler and a curling coach, so I've had a gradual return to play to curling for, I think it was 3 seasons. I had to basically sit on the bench. I couldn't play. So 2 seasons ago, I returned, and I found, okay, I was struggling with the slide delivery, so I changed my delivery to doing a stand-up delivery. I found that year I could not do the sweeping action. So just the, head down and coming back up all the time was a challenge. But I could generally be out there and stand still and hold the broom and, make things work that way. I returned again last year to curling, and I ended up finding that things had improved within that 1 year enough that now I can do sweeping. Can I sweep a whole game? No, but I'm at least up to half a game that I can sweep. So that's been a huge step forward. I still have to work on some of the other stuff, and that's going to be related to the vestibular activities and other activities I'm still working on with physios. But it's getting there. I've also been able to return to kind of my normal practice of coaching curling teams. So for a while there, the only way I could coach was to be on the backboard. So I couldn't go on the ice because I wasn't comfortable with that. But now I found last season, I could be out on the ice. I could be out with my athletes, which was a huge benefit and just kind of that boost that I needed to say, yeah, things are getting better. Things like watching TV or videos still causing me problems. So I tend to, when I can, avoid that. Excuse me. My computer tolerance has significantly improved. So as I say, kind of when symptom onset started, I was good for maybe an hour a day. Now with proper breaks and taking the time I need through the day, I can put in a full day on a computer and still be able to function at the end of the day and move forward and still have that social and family life that I enjoy. The other thing I've started to notice is my environmental tolerances are better. So I can tolerate being in a store. So when before maybe I couldn't be in for more than 10 minutes before things would kick in and become a problem, now I can actually go into a store for half an hour or whatever and have very few symptom onsets. So that has been huge. I still do occasionally react to, if you think of it when you're in a dollar store, it's a very busy environment visually. That type of environment will still cause me some problems, but nothing like what I had before. So overall, where I've started with symptom onset to where I am now is a huge difference. And a lot of that is because of the therapies, the programs, and everything else that I have taken part of or in part in over the past few years. So that's my story. I'm happy to entertain any discussions you wish to have, questions you have. If you do want to see the collages, I'd probably save that towards the end of the time just to make sure, I don't trigger somebody off who wants to ask questions.
Hi, I'm Lori. Can I just make a comment?
Sure.
It's really inspiring. Part of my issue has been returning to work, and that's all I've been trying to do and have not been able to do it yet. And so I found your approach and really, really inspiring in terms of you getting back to work. One of the questions I have is, was it difficult to find a program for you to, that 1 year program to help you get back to work? And also when you made applications, I know it's supposed to be okay if you have a disability to get a job, but was it actually, was there some discrimination or difficult, I suppose?
Yeah, so finding the 1 year program, it was a bit of a challenge because we were trying to find something with basically as little computer time as we could. Good luck this day and age. What I actually found was a radiation safety program because I am in the nuclear field. So it was a natural kind of interest to me. And once I got in there and working with the instructors, they're like, yeah, you don't have to be in front of a computer if you don't want to. And from there, I've actually taken on a job with a regulatory body. So I do inspecting. So I now have kind of a nice mix going on with my current job where If I have to do a full day on the computer and it's a bad day, I work from home. So I can take, if I need to take an hour or two break at some point in the day just to let things calm down, they're fine with that. My supervisor's the type, he's like, as long as you get the work done in the week, I don't care. If you take, 3 hours of breaks in a day, as long as the work gets done, we're good with it. Um, as far as the application process, um, I did disclose, I think, on every single application that I did need accommodations. When it came to the computer stuff and that side of it, nobody really batted an eye. They're like, yeah, okay, you can have extra time, or yeah, we can break it up if we need to, or sometimes they would block you for like a 3 hour time slot and say, well, realistically, most people are done in the first hours. Don't worry about it. So that part of it wasn't bad. I do think there was some discriminatory, intentionally or not, that did happen because one question I know I got in a face-to-face interview was, do you think you'll be able to do this job? Well, knowing that it involved going out into the field and being in different environments, right or wrong, I answered honestly and I said, I don't know. Um, until I'm in the environment, I can't tell you. And I know I did not get that job. I know I was qualified for it, but I in the back of my mind, the question is there. I know I can't go back and ask them, but it's just kind of a gut feeling that that did play into it. Um, but as I say, like they can't openly say, no, we're not going to hire you because you have a disability. So, but the good ones are out there. And as I say, like where I've landed, they're more than happy to accommodate. And usually the first response is, yes, we're going to do that. And then it's like almost a second thought of, we're not sure how, but yes, we're going to do that. um, so they are working with me, and it does take, like, you do have to advocate because even friends I've had for years yet who are in management roles, one of them one day we were talking just in general, she said, yeah, I interviewed and somebody flagged that they had this disability where they needed, maybe they couldn't come in the 3 days a week that we specified, but they might be able to do first half or last half of the week. And her first instinct was, why are you telling me that? Because that's showing me a weakness. But once we talked it through, by the end of our conversation, she went, oh, now I understand why that was flagged. It's because they're interviewing me as much as I'm interviewing them to make sure that it's a workplace that's going to be accepting and accommodating. So, I mean, there's going to be good, there's going to be bad. That's with any workplace, but so far my experience has been very positive.
There was a comment in the chat that said they said at least you were honest and they lost a great employee.
Well, thank you. I think I actually got a better job out of it. So, there's always a reason.
I found too, I'll just,
Sure.
jump in here and tell me to be quiet at any time. I found to your comments, I think a lot of us can relate, just as you were, a lot of us have our video turned off, so you might not be able to tell, but as you're talking about the planning and pacing and planning and pacing and accepting and planning and pacing and planning and I'm sure I'm not alone and we're all just shaking or nodding our heads. Yes, oh my God, yes, right, yes. So I think it's really great that you seem to have discovered a system in your own planning and pay. You figured it out. It feels like you figured it out.
Yeah.
And allowing so many areas now in your life, like your sports and work and living at, my God, you need a big gold star. Like it just feels like you really got it, so it's encouraging to know that because there's hope maybe for the rest of us to figure out our own pattern, our own rhythm, if you will,
Yeah.
It's for me, it's fabulous. Thank you.
Oh, not a problem.
Tara, I would just like to say your slides were quite motivated. It brought a few tears at my eyes, and I'm like, wow, you did it. And the way you went about doing it, like, you started at step one and you build, and like where you are right now, it's unbelievable. I'm so proud of you. I'm so happy for you, and I'm happy for me because you have just motivated me a little more. Because when we have those days that we give up and we go, oh, it's not going to get better. It's just going to be there. And you just give up all hopes and you just don't know what is going to happen. But
Yeah.
listening to you, you know what? Through the tunnel, definitely there is light, and it's just working through what's happening with you. Like you
Yeah.
found all the resources to help you when you were down. You have the counseling, the physiotherapist, the eye doctor. So you work with everything to be where you are. And you should be very proud of yourself. And thank you so much for sharing those words and wisdom with us.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that you found benefit in my story. And the one thing I will say is, don't be in a rush. I mean, for me, it's been almost 5 years. We're getting close to that. And yeah, it will take, like for me, it basically took me 4.5 years before I could get back to work. So don't, I know you're going to get frustrated, but always, try to keep it in the back of your brain or someplace, that thought that, yeah, it will get better at some point, but you can only go as fast as your body lets you.
Sarah, have you ever considered being a mentor to anyone? Like, like Ontario Brain Injury Association takes on mentors. Um,
Uh, I've never thought of it, but I didn't know that was out there. So
yeah, okay.
yeah, so I
Just
learned something.
There's also another comment from Lori who said, "Thank you so much for sharing your story."
You're very welcome.
Do you have any last comments or questions? And then we can go ahead and close out today's talk.
I think Tara was going to share something with us at the end.
Yeah, if you want to see the collages I did, I'm happy to share those.
Love to. Thank
Okay.
you.
All right, so let's see if I can get PowerPoint to play nice on this one. All right, so this was part of my CBT, or cognitive behavior. So the first thing they had me do was kind of where I was before. So this shows kind of how I perceived my life at that point in time. So before the pain and before the brain injury stuff got identified. So it was stuff like, I've got my curling in there, my coaching, my schedule was very busy. It felt like things were kind of on that path in the right trajectory. I could travel. I had, friendship networks, social networks, everything just seemed to be in a good spot at the point. So then the next thing they had me do, and this is the one where if it bothers you, let me know and I will change it quickly. Because this is when the next one is when I was at the peak of my problems or symptoms. So this one here, I will admit some parts of it still triggers me. So, at that point I had a lot of therapy going on. There was the visual stuff that was kicking in a lot. Part of my, we never just have the brain injury, but there's always that secondary stuff. So mine was neck and shoulder pains. I found I was very angry. I felt lost and just like my brain was scrambled and there was just at that point, I couldn't see the way forward. So that was kind of my interpretation of it at that point. So the next one here is the now. So this is the now at the time of the cognitive behavioral therapy. Not now, but then. So at that point, things were starting to get better. I felt like my friends were coming back. I felt like I was starting to get a direction because this was also the time I was coming up with the plan for how I might return to work. Things were starting to kind of come from that scrambled aspect into a little more organization and feeling normal. I was finding my I can't do it were becoming I can do it, which was a huge change. And it was kind of the middle picture there is it was kind of like feeling that, my sense of self was coming back, because I think I felt I lost that for a bit as I was going through things. And just everything kind of seemed to be going in the right direction to come back and get on track with what I wanted to do next. So then the next one that they had me do was one of the future. So projecting, okay, after things are back, and what do I want to see in my future plans? So for me, it was, I want to get back to having my own place to live. I want to get traveling some more. I want to be free of pain as much as possible. I want to have my coaching and my curling back. I want to have, if I want to go outside and do something, I don't want to be held back as much as I had been. So just a sense of doors opening and kind of the burdens or that chain, that weight coming off is where I was really hoping to get. And when I look at this now, I kind of, look at each of the pictures and I'm kind of going, check, check, the check marks are going in. And I actually talked about this with my occupational therapist this week. And I now have a new thing to do. And she wants me to do a current for now and another future slide. So I'll be working on that in the next couple of weeks. But the interesting thing for me that I found, and I will warn you, I'm going to put all 4 slides up together now for those that it bothers. But when I put them all together and I look at my story in pictures, like I look at where I was before, what I've gone through, and now I'm looking at it at my future is my now. And just seeing kind of how my story has progressed and how things have changed, has really helped me kind of with that acceptance. And it's now kind of what's pushing me forward to, okay, what's next? How do I make it to that next step? So those were the slides. And the way I was instructed, if you want to do these for yourself, was just quite literally, I would go online. I'd think of, okay, I have, maybe if I'm doing the during, it's like, okay, I know I have pain. What can I pull? And it was just a Google search and looking at the pictures and picking one out that resonated with me. So you can do it that way. Other people I know, my therapist shared with me, they like hand drawn their own collages, or they would clip stuff. If they had, newspapers, magazines, they might go through and clip stuff out of that. So for me, I found this was kind of therapeutic, but it also kind of led me to a bit of goal setting as well. Like thinking of okay, here's where I am now, where do I want to be? It's very much a goal setting activity. So those I found have been extremely helpful over the years to kind of go back and think about. And as I say, right now they're kind of my motivation to keep moving forward. So
The best one I like is in your future new normal, where you kick that pain away.
yeah.
Get it going. You don't need
Get rid of it. Get rid of it. We don't need that.
Yeah, get rid of it. Thank you so much for sharing, Tara.
Oh, not a problem.
Thank you so much for sharing those slides. Does anyone have any last comments or questions?
I think the slides are a really good visual. It looks like something you could do even just on your own, just in terms of a little motivator, because sometimes we forget where we are, we forget where we've come from, how far we've come, right? So even just looking at this now, the 4, I can see your progress just visually, and it's exciting, actually. It's really exciting, and yeah, so it's really great. Thank you, Tara. Really,
You're
really
welcome.
great.
Yeah, and like I know I'm a visual person, so it seemed to resonate really well with me. But like as I think of it now, I mean, if you're somebody who's better with words, like you could sit down and kind of do a page per part and just write words that mean something. And if that's more the way that resonates with you. So there's lots of ways to do it, and it was kind of fun to do too. Just don't try and do it all at once.